Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into the Gender Development Index. Now this is a really vital tool because it tells this complex and honestly pretty surprising story about how progress is actually shared between women and men.
So let's kick things off with a bit of a puzzle, one that's right at the heart of global development. Check this out. On average, women around the world live longer, healthier lives than men. But at the exact same time, they earn way less. We're talking about 40% less on a global scale. So you have two huge metrics telling two completely different stories.
And that brings up the big question, right? How can both of these things be true? To even begin to untangle this, we need the right kind of tool, a way to measure the complete picture of gender inequality.
And that tool is the Gender Development Index, or GDI. The United Nations created it specifically to give us a clear, data-driven look at the gender gap all across the globe.
Now, the really clever thing about the GDI is that it doesn't just measure women's development in a vacuum. Nope, it's all about direct comparison. It takes the famous Human Development Index, the HDI, and it basically calculates it twice, once for women and once for men, and then sees how they stack up.
The math behind it is actually pretty simple. You take the female HDI score, you take the male HDI score, and you just divide the female score by the male score. That's it. It gives you one single, really powerful ratio.
And here's the most important part, a GDI value of exactly 1. That means perfect equality. It's the goal. The closer a country gets to that number, the smaller the gap between women and men. And yeah, you guessed it, any number below 1 means women are at a disadvantage.
So what actually goes into that final GDI number? Well, it's built on the three big pillars of the Human Development Index. First up is health, and we measure that by looking at life expectancy. And this is where you see this incredibly consistent pattern across the world. Take a highly developed country like Switzerland, for example. Women there live almost 4 years longer than men. It's this biological advantage you see pretty much everywhere.
The second area is education, which is measured by years of schooling. And this is a real success story. In a lot of countries, like Canada, the gap hasn't just closed. It's actually flipped. Women are now averaging slightly more time in school than men. And then we get to the third dimension, standard of living, which is measured by average income. And this is where the picture just changes completely. Even in an economic powerhouse like Germany, the gap is just enormous. Men's average income is nearly 50% higher. This one factor is the single biggest reason gender inequality is so persistent.
And look, this isn't just a story about a few countries. When you zoom out and look at the global data, you see the exact same pattern playing out again and again and again. Women are ahead in health and education, but there's a massive, massive gap in income.
Just take a look at this table. It groups countries by their overall level of development, from very high all the way down to low. But notice that last column. It doesn't matter if you're talking about the wealthiest nations or the poorest. The biggest gender gap is always the same thing, income.
Now, here's a fascinating twist. In a few countries, like Qatar, Latvia, and Poland, the GDI is actually above 1. This means women's overall development score is higher than men's. So how is that even possible with the income gap? Well, it's because women's huge advantage in health, the fact that they live so much longer, is big enough to completely outweigh their disadvantage in income, pushing their total score just over the top.
So, after looking at all this data, what's the big picture? What is the Gender Development Index ultimately telling us about the state of our world?
The story is incredibly clear. We have made amazing progress on gender equality in health and in education. But that economic piece, equal pay, equal opportunity, that remains the final and most stubborn frontier. The GDI doesn't just tell us, hey, there's a problem. It shows us exactly where the problem is. And this insight is absolutely crucial. By pointing directly to the economy as the main obstacle, the GDI helps policymakers, organizations, and citizens focus their energy and their resources where they're needed most, on the root of the inequality that's still here.
And that leaves us with this final thought. Measuring human development is about so much more than just a national average. The real question is whether the benefits of all that progress are lifting everyone up together. And the GDI makes sure we never lose sight of that question.